I would now like to introduce Ala Katz-Nelson. She is a freelance writer and she is a freelance science writer and editor with bylines at the New York Times, Scientific American, Nature, BBC Focus, and many others, and she is also a regular contributor at Chemical Engineering News. Ala is here to talk about how to juggle outside work outside of journalism with your journalism work.
Thank you. I am so excited to talk to you about the very practical things about making a sustainable career out of freelancing. So when I first started freelancing, I initially thought that I would be doing primarily journalism, but that did not turn out to be the case. And in fact, I actually know very few people who are self-employed as science writers and who do exclusively journalism. It's just very difficult, I think, financially to make that work, especially if you don't have the support of, maybe a spouse with a full-time job, or if you live in an expensive place. It's funny, we were talking before about how both Nikki and I are like the stable jobs in the family. So you can do that. Luckily, as science communicators, we have many ways that we can put our skills to work, and it is totally possible to come up with this very personalized mix of projects across communication, doing many types of things that will feed you creatively and pay the rent. So I'm just going to talk through like 4-ish kind of ideas or points that have kind of helped me think about creating this balance for myself over the years. And point 1 is decide how much money you need or want to make. And if somebody says to you that's too much money, or money doesn't or shouldn't matter, you will want to nod politely or not and go talk to somebody else. Because this is like one of the wonders of freelancing. You get to make your work what you want. I have my friend and occasional career coach, Elena Levine, likes to say, you are the CEO of You Inc. And these are really your decisions to make. So of course, I'm not saying that once you imagine that number, a golden cloud full of dimes and quarters and $1,000 bills is going to emerge over your head. But it's really naming your goal will really help kind of define it, and those financial needs will really help you build your portfolio work. And of course, that will change, in different parts of through different times in your life, and that is fine and great. So people talk a lot about the importance of treating freelancing as a business, and I think it's especially important when you're thinking about weaving together different types of science communication work, because you're kind of trying to balance out a lot of things that have to work together, and you have to see what each one's sort of contribution is. So, very practical pro tip. Make yourself a spreadsheet, put the annual income you are shooting for at the bottom, divide your chart by 12, track how much work you book every month, and also track what percentage you're hitting for your monthly goal, just so you can see that number. And there's other things you might want to track too, like how much time you spend on each project, and how much you enjoyed it or didn't. And that kind of leads me to point 2, which is that it's really helpful to bring intention to choosing your projects. I took a workshop with a wonderful longtime science writer named Christy Ashwandon, and she talked about, did she talk about 3 Ps? I thought they were buckets, but these buckets, as Nikki said, one is personal passion, the second one is career advancement, and the third one is money. They're not Ps. I don't know what the Ps are. So each project you choose should hit 2 of those 3 buckets. So for personal interest, does it let you explore a topic you're really excited about, or support a cause you're excited about? or for career advancement, is it going to open doors for you in some big way, or build your resume, or give you experience doing something that you're trying to learn? And so for money, well, duh, but the way I try to think about the money is that if you're doing something for the money, you can think about, will it enable me to take on something that won't make me as much money if I do this thing? So these things all work together. So, so point 3, like, what are some of these other types of work? I think one of the easiest options for early career writers is working with academic institutions, like alumni magazines or department newsletters. They generally pay really well. They tend to turn into repeat work, and these stories tend to be straightforward. I have enjoyed thinking about them as sort of a chance to practice something, like either interviewing out of my comfort zone or writing, thinking about a story in a different way, and that has made them also really fun. There's so many of these publications. Columbia has a vast network of them, for one, and then every institution, every school within the institution, often departments. So that's a real solid starting point. There's also a lot of work out there doing conferences and meeting reports. Some of that will give you in the long term ideas for stories that you might not otherwise have had. I used to do this for the New York Academy of Sciences and a couple of other nonprofits. This work, it's sort of around, you kind of have to sniff it out. And generally, nonprofits and foundations work with science writers in lots of different capacities, like writing profiles of grantees, or different types of internal communications, or doing social media. If you have a science background, you can edit scientific papers and grants for researchers. I don't do this very much, but I know a lot of people do. I've been approached by agencies that do this and have been horrified by how little they pay. So if you do this, one way to do it is to reach out to labs individually. A lot of labs that are large enough to have a lab manager will often either have or be open to having somebody sort of on contract who provides this kind of support to their team. Federal agencies are another avenue to look into. They pay really well, and they often hire contract writers for various reports. I do that kind of work for the National Eye Institute. So there's also content writing from companies. There's big brands like Costco or Patagonia, or also small startups that are doing something niche where you feel like you might have a particular set of skills to contribute, a particular background. So everything that I've talked about, you'll also have to think really carefully about conflicts of interest, and we'll get to that in a second. But I do want to say that I have barely scratched the surface of what's possible. There's work in video and social media and speaking and running workshops and helping science-focused companies develop messaging around their products, and lots of other things. It's really super open. Just yesterday, I was reading a column by a journalist who is wonderful. I really love his work, but he was referring to work he does with scientists where he helps them figure out how to navigate using AI in productive ways. And I just thought, there's an idea. I personally have been getting more interested in working directly with researchers and helping them edit either writing or talks geared towards a broader audience, and I found that really a rewarding avenue as well. So as you dig in and you explore different things, you'll sort of bump into different opportunities, and when you can sort of look for them by just really actively asking people who are self-employed, just what types of work do you do? You can be very nosy, how did you find that work? What is it actually like? How much does it pay? All of these things I think people are usually open to talk about. This is one of the reasons I almost always go to the NASW meeting every year, because it's sort of really an opportunity for me to get connected to different ways of doing things that I haven't done myself, or have kind of let drop for a little while, want to reconnect to. Also, LinkedIn is a really great resource. Journalists get free access to LinkedIn, like the paid version, which you probably know, but it's extremely helpful to just like get that free membership, dig in there and look for mine for either topics that you're really interested in or like the types of opportunities that you're interested in, and it is all in there. So now we're gonna move to point 4, which is sort of the elephant in the room, and that is conflicts of interest. So if you are working as a journalist, you can't be reporting on individuals or institutions or companies or even topics that you get paid to work on outside of your reporting. So some of this stuff is going to be really obvious. So like if you write a story for like Columbia's medical school, you are not going to be reporting on that research for the New York Times. But the thing is that usually it's not that straightforward. And one of the reasons it's not that straightforward is that different publications and even different editors within publications have very different ideas about what constitutes a conflict of interest. So like some editors or some publications would hold that, if you've been paid by Columbia at all, you can't write about anything relating to Columbia or interview any Columbia faculty. So others would be much more flexible. So I'm just gonna come out and say that this is not really fair, honestly. It's really not fair that freelancers bear the main burden of managing conflicts of interest, even while most journalism outlets don't pay that well and increasingly rely on freelance written content. So I think that editors who demand this kind of unreasonable level of purity are sort of delusional, but these are the constraints that we work with. And I think it's important to remember that whatever you establish for yourself is going to define the types of work that you do. So some people navigate conflicts of interest by just confining their non-journalism work to topics that are far afield of where they want to report on. So if you're really interested in writing about biomedical research or the biotech industry or fraud, you can just, seek out companies that work in sort of the climate space or seek out nonprofits that work in totally different areas. I personally have not found that this kind of topic delineation really works for me for various reasons, and my general way of doing it is to analyze situations case by case. One freelancer I know recently told me that she actually wrote her own personal conflicts of interest policy where she just lays out for herself where she draws these lines and kind of uses that as a guiding force, and I think that is really smart when you're mixing work. But it is really up to you as a business owner essentially to navigate this, and the way you do that is by really thinking through what your business does and doesn't do and kind of making those decisions clearly, and also by disclosing possible conflicts to editors. So that will absolutely mean that there are lucrative and fun opportunities that you have to pass up. I've definitely been there, but there's also going to be plenty that you can do. So, thanks.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was super interesting.
Yeah, I was riveted.
Yeah. I know, I was taking notes the whole time. I'm curious what your breakdown is, if you don't mind sharing, of your work in journalism versus outside work, at least in terms of time.
Yeah, I think this kind of is always a little bit in flux for me, and I think there's time and there's money, and those breakdowns are different. So until recently, I had a contract with a magazine that involved monthly work. That was probably about a quarter of my income and maybe a third of my time. And now that I don't have that contract anymore for various reasons, because one of the difficult things about freelancing, especially in journalism right now, is that contracts are getting very bad. And so in this particular situation, the contract went south, and so and so I don't do it anymore. So I'm still sort of figuring out my sort of new balance. But I think I would say that I spent maybe half my time, maybe the third or half my time doing journalism at this point, and the rest doing other things. And I would say that income from journalism was maybe a quarter of the slate. So I think that the other work sort of supports it.
Good to know. You know, even when you're only focusing on journalism, it can be hard, especially when you're first starting out in freelance, which I will say, I'm speaking from personal experience here, it can sometimes be hard to know how much work to take on because you just don't know how long it's going to take to do certain types of stories. As you get more reps in doing certain types of stories, working with certain editors, understanding the editorial processes at different newsrooms, I think that becomes a little bit more second nature, though you guys can tell me if I'm wrong. But I could see it being much more difficult as you're also weaving in these other income streams where you're working with completely new employers and you're doing different types of work that might be like completely different from place to place, possibly even different media from place to place. So I'm curious how you balance your time.
Yeah, I would say that both for journalism and non-journalism, like one thing that has really enabled my freelance, sort of continued freelance existence is having contracts, basically, one with a magazine, but currently two others that are not with a magazine, but that I do either every month or every 2 or 3 months, where it's a large chunk of work, but I can build it into the flow, and it's a very predictable income. So that is time where I'm like, okay, I know what that time will take. I've done it, it's built in, and I think building those kinds of relationships and these long-term arrangements is like a huge deal for freelancing. Otherwise, I think that the a lot of the other projects, they work on maybe varying time scales, I guess. I feel like those other projects tend to be more predictable. Like, I feel like when I'm tracking hours, I have a really hard time tracking hours for stories that I do as a journalist, and like it's just not a big deal to track hours for these other things. They tend to be more straightforward. So I feel like it actually makes my life easier to build in this other work, not harder.
Maybe it's like you're in a state of flow when you're doing the journalism and time evaporates.
Yeah, time just disappears.
So much time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
Okay, last question, and then I do want to get to the workshop. Because contracts have come up twice now,
No.
Can you guys talk about what has made the contract so bad and what people should look out for?
You go first.
I was going to say you go first. I would say one of the bad things is that indemnity clauses have gotten really bad. So there's most contracts, not all of them, actually. I've been really lucky. I think most of the places that I work with regularly, either they didn't have them in the contract originally or I made them take it out. They were willing to roll with it. But in general, there's going to be a clause somewhere in the contract that says basically what's going to happen if the outlet gets sued because of around something that you did. And for a number of reasons, I would say over the last 10 years, I think these clauses have gotten more common, and they have now, the text of them has changed so that now they say, you, freelancer, are going to pay the legal bills of this entire media corporation if anybody, even somebody who does not have a leg to stand on, sues us. Like that's literally what it says. And it's just, and I've definitely turned stuff down, or I always, when I see that, I'm like, no, that's not fair. Like, can we take it out? And a lot of times places can take it out, or they can change it to, I have sometimes accepted a version of, if I really want to do the work, right? And if my gauge of the situation is like, I think this is going to be okay, I will sometimes accept an indemnity clause that says that, okay, we can do that, but only that will only happen if it's gone all the way through a court of law and a judge has ruled that I screwed up and that's why we're being sued. Like, that's the only version of that I will sign. But I've definitely been in situations where the editors are like, nope, sorry, this can't change. And so then you have to let the work go, because I don't feel like it's reasonable or at all fair to expect a freelancer to sign something like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I would add too that there's kind of more rights grabbing going on now than there used to be, where the contract demands that it's either work for hire or that they kind of keep the copyright. I think it's important to know that lots of, my son is totally horrified by this. Lots of places have two contracts. They'll give you the work for hire contract, and
That's the bad one.
that's the bad one. Most people, or they are counting on the fact that people will sign it. But if you write back and say, I don't sign work for hire contracts, can you give me the other one? They'll just send you the other one, which is totally infuriating. But then there's another thing that I think is important to note that is emerging on the freelance landscape is increasingly, like I now have, this contract that I gave up was because the publication decided to do contracts through a third party. And this is emerging because of the labor regulations that are struggling with the idea of who is a contractor and who is an employee. And essentially, companies don't really want to deal with it. And so they get around it by having you sign a W-2 on a third party.
Wait, really?
Yes.
Wow.
Oh my god.
Yes, this is just in the last
Isn't that like
year.
fraud? Maybe? I don't know.
So yeah, like you have to go through all this extra steps to prove that you're a contractor, and it's very difficult to negotiate with the third party. So contracts that used to be amendable just by kind of going up your usual channels are less so. So.
Well, I guess we need to do an entire
You
session
should
in
do
the next
contracts,
one on
yeah.
contracts.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I think that is all we have time for these little presentations, but we will now break out into the workshops. I want to just say a couple things about this. So first of all, we'll break into two groups. There's people online and people in the audience here right now. And we will basically split the time. So Ala will be with one group, Nikki will be with the other, and then we will switch. Just because Nikki has presented on pitching and Ala has presented on outside work does not mean you can only ask them questions about those things. They are seasoned professionals. They've been doing this for a long time. You've also probably read stories from each of them and have specific questions about those stories. I want you guys to feel really comfortable asking just anything about the freelance life. And also, please feel free to use personal stories you're working on to kind of workshop them, workshop your pitches, workshop like any conflicts of interest, that sort of thing. So use this as an opportunity to just like ask them any questions that you've had about pitching, freelancing, whatever it may be. All right, that's it.